This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this is our 2023 NBA Finals preview, which it's going down between the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat. And this is definitely the most unexpected NBA Finals I think we've said or we've experienced in recent history. But it's well worth the conversation to be had when you look at the dynamics of both of these teams. And as always, man, got to roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man's. Been doing it for a long time. We've watched the ups and downs and the roller coaster that is the culmination of bringing the best of the East and the best of the West together for us to sit down and have these previews. 10 years running, my man Warren Shaw ripping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? I think I can speak for the both of us and say I don't think that we anticipated that the finals was going to end up being this way, but very much in the way that we have kind of outlined everything that's happened through the course of this year, we probably felt like these are the two best teams to give an honest representation of how topsy-turvy this NBA season has been.
Right. I think where you ended is where I definitely picked that up. It's not the finals we expected, but maybe the finals we deserved, in an NBA season that was so unpredictable and extremely wide open. We've got one of the more unlikely results, I think, in the NBA finals, despite what we thought was going to happen going into the playoffs. But credit to both of these teams who have, fought their way to get here. Denver had a little easier road, I guess, in some respects, especially in the conference finals aspect of it. But at the end of the day, they're going to meet a very, very game opponent in the Miami Heat, who deserves a lot of credit for getting here as a number 8 seed.
Well, I'm not gonna reveal too much of what you just alluded to as part of my deduction of reasoning to justify who I think is going to wind up winning this. But I find it interesting that you said that, when you look at a team like the Denver Nuggets, whose path, when you kind of, put them up against what other teams have had to do in order to put themselves on a path of trying to get to a championship, you can honestly say, you know what? The Denver Nuggets may not have had the stiffest of competition, but this is exactly the reason why you win as many games as you do. You lead your conference because ultimately you want the easiest path to get to an opportunity to winning a championship. You want to have your team clicking not only on all cylinders, but you want your team fully rested, ready to go to make that final push to get 4 more games. The goal is 16, right? If you get into the playoffs. So ultimately, if you are the Denver Nuggets, you should be best equipped to be able to run this thing for as long as necessary till you see your way through to possibly winning your first NBA championship. And if you're the Miami Heat, you're looking at this and saying, we've basically had everything thrown at us, including the kitchen sink. And there's probably nothing that we will not already be accustomed to, used to seeing, especially since we've already tasted getting to an NBA Finals. So the ultimate question I think that comes down to this show, and I think it's what brings us to doing this preview, is what shakes loose? What separates the men from the boys when determining who we think is best equipped to hoist the Larry O'Brien trophy?
Right. One thing about this series is that, it's going to be evenly coached. Both of these teams have longevity, within in that position. And I think when you're trying to break down the series, you're looking for, like you said, the nuances of like, all right, well, what's going to happen? Denver in the past, take it all the way back to that bubble season. They were a team that was very much Miami Heat-ish, right? Coming back and doing the unexpected multiple times down 3-1 to make to the conference finals, only to lose to the Lakers ultimately. Fast forward now, they look like a more dominant team, and Miami's on the backside of that, while not necessarily coming back from 3-1 deficits, but coming from being the number 8 seed. So the role reversals are a little bit different here. I think when you think about that aspect and how far these teams have come, and even Miami just from a year ago, being a number 1 seed and not being a number 8 seed. So it's really, really interesting, the dynamics, I think, of this NBA finals. And I'm really excited to break it down, because I think, it's going to be a lot more competitive than I think some of our, contemporaries are going to give it credit for, just by looking at number one versus number eight. But you just can't discredit what Miami's been able to do to get here, and the impact of the coaching and the impact of the role players that team has.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's look at it from both teams, Shaw, and then we can obviously get into what we think is going to be our X factors, or people who we think may have a significant impact on the outcome of what this series is going to dictate. And then ultimately we will also, get into the gist of, who we think is going to wind up winning the chip. The first thing that I think I want to allude to when we talk about the Denver Nuggets, because, listen, they got to the finals first, right? They took care of business, ousting the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't question it so much as improbability, but also acknowledgement of a team that was well gelled and ready and prepared for whatever matchups, whoever the opposition is. So when you talk about the Denver Nuggets, I think the one thing that sticks out to me, Shaw, is versatility. This is the type of basketball team that I think can give it to you any way you choose. You want to go up tempo, they can go up tempo, even if they have probably the slowest yet smoothest big man in the game of basketball. You want to break it down half court? Well, you got no better than arguably a two-time NBA MVP who you can get the ball down to, but more importantly, he makes it look like an open transition game because he's got shooters spread out that can shoot the basketball, and the way that he passes the basketball allows for those teams, allows for his teammates to move and find their spots. To me, Shaw, this to me is what I felt was what makes teams most dangerous. It's not so much that you have just the most dominant player, but you have the dominant player whose game is so versatile that when it calls for you to change up the way that you probably started to dictate and the team counters that you can find another way to force the team to counter what you counter. And that's how it comes down to, is who basically out counters the other team the most. And the only way you do that is having a player whose game has evolved so much that he can actually change the tempo and the dynamics of the way that the game is actually started to what it actually will end up finishing.
Yeah, the thing about Denver really is that it's just the consistency and the elevation of what Joker does. Um, I'd be very surprised in this series at any point if Michael Malone changes the starting lineup. That has been their starting five. There's been a certain level of consistency, buoyed by what Jokic does in the middle, creating for them and even playing defense, I think, when necessary. That just gives this team a certain level of consistency and no viability going into this NBA Finals specifically. Miami, on the other hand, which we'll talk about, we've seen them switch their lineups around, and because they've kind of had to based on matchups and even guys being in and out of the lineup. But Denver, when healthy, is one of the bigger teams in the league. Especially with Aaron Gordon at that 4 position, and KCP and Jamal Murray, and obviously Michael Porter Jr. as well. Like those are just big dudes. And I think what we're going to see in this series is, the Denver Nuggets trying to actually be more physical, than Miami, because I think they have the horses, they have the dogs, they have the length. And they're gonna be defending at a level I don't think we've even seen them defend before, even though they are the best offensive team in the playoffs thus far, buoyed by what Joker does, especially creating, at that post position, or even just getting the ball off a rebound and dribbling down and creating offense. Those are some of the things I really love about this Denver team, and what I expect to see throughout the course of the series is just that level of consistency with their starting lineup. And it'll be interesting to see if Bruce Brown and guys like that coming off the bench, Jeff Green, can be able to continue to do the roles that they've been doing so well in these playoffs thus far.
The one thing that I think also stands out to me, Shaw, is, and well, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the coaching machinations that I think is going to take place when you've got arguably two of the best head coaches, one, Hall of Fame ready with his credentials, and Eric Spoelstra, and Mike Malone, who's quickly building up that resume to be, in that conversation. But the one thing that I think makes the Denver Nuggets probably one of the more dangerous teams is accountability. And I think if the intent is that you want to go in and you want to your point, impose your will with your height, with your length, with your physicality, that I think Mike Malone is the first person to call out his team when they are basically bailing out the other team's inability to stop what you naturally have the ability to be doing when the advantage is in your case. And we've seen this throughout the course of this NBA playoffs, where teams fail to stay disciplined in what has effectively gotten them either a lead, has gotten them, be it a lead in the game or even a lead in the series. The discipline to me is key. And I think it speaks volumes. And you had mentioned to this how coaching is so critical now and has been exposed so much so in the playoffs, that when you see that a team is decisively taking advantage of another team's weakness, and it may not necessarily be that is their moniker or what they're true to, you still have to understand the gravitas of why you are the team that you are. And that means you stay true till that team proves otherwise, that they can beat you at that. And we've seen that. We'll talk about this with the Lakers and with the Celtics in our autopsy at some point. But what I'm saying is that the Denver Nuggets proved and the Miami Heat proved that until you prove to them that you can beat them at what they are currently doing to you, that they will stay true until that table is turned or until that narrative speaks a different language to them. And I think that when you have coaches like Spoelstra, like Malone, they're going to hold the younger guys who probably have never been in this spot before. Doesn't necessarily have to be the Jimmy Butlers or the Nikola Jokic's or the Jamal Murrays. But if you're the Michael Porters, if you're the Aaron Gordons, and this is new territory for you, the Caleb Martins, that's why your coaches are going to be there to speak to those things that are obviously key to the team's success. And I see that a lot more so with the Denver Nuggets throughout the course of their run to get to this point in the finals than I had seen in any of the previous years that we had talked about the possibility of the Nuggets even getting to a Western Conference Finals, let alone getting to an NBA Finals.
All right. So one thing I will say though, if I'm concerned about Denver in one capacity, is that they have really shortened their rotation. So it is basically 7 guys now, the starting 5, and then Bruce Brown and Jeff Green off the bench. Maybe you see Christian Brown coming in a little bit. I think we saw a little bit of Reggie Jackson in the last series, but outside of that, it's really been Brown and Green, and that's it. 7 guys. Miami is not afraid to play, all the way down to Highsmith. You know what I mean? The 12th man on the
I thought you were going to say Haslam, because he sounds like he's been chomping at the bit to get in. So
anyway, I'm not going to touch that. We'll talk about Miami later on.
Right.
But if I'm worried about Denver in any capacity, it might be a little bit of depth. So we all know what it is. It can get a little dicey sometimes in the non-Jokic minutes. Can Murray do enough? He's averaging 28 points a game in the playoffs this year. Like that's pretty ridiculous, So, against a different defense who was going to scheme against them, I think Miami's really going to try to, make the others beat them, so to speak. So now it does come to Michael. Can it be your time to shine, Michael Porter Jr.? Can KCP continue to deliver, defensively first, but offensively second, especially when it comes to knocking down the 3 ball? And again, I think the play of Bruce Brown basically serving as a de facto backup point guard for this team right now. Can he still be able to get some other guys involved here and there, he's not a high assist guy, but just be able to, move the ball offensively and then score when the opportunity arises for him too. Those are things that I think Denver has to be sure that, hopefully it doesn't get too big for some of these guys who've never been there before, especially when you're going with such a tight-knit rotation of only 7 players.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this is our 2023 NBA Finals preview between the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat. As always, be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. You can always check out our shows at www.thebaselineNBA.com. And as always, if you're catching us on YouTube or any visual platform, if you see the 19 Media Group logo, that means we rocks with the 19 Media Group. Be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to check out our show and the litany of great shows in the 19 Media Group family. So, Shaw, let's transition ourselves over to the Miami Heat, right, for a quick spell. The one thing that we saw, obviously, from this Miami Heat and this Miami Heat run, and I know everybody is fawning over the Heat culture because it speaks volumes, where you can essentially take 8 undrafted players essentially and run them out there on the basketball court, and still be able to find yourself playing in the Eastern Conference. I think to some people, part of you is saying, well, does that speak more to the lack of of acknowledging the opportunities for said undrafted players to have access to getting a true run and that they can prove their worth to be in the NBA? Or is it speaking more to the overhype that we were selling on how difficult the path is to get out of the East because of the talent level that has shifted from the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference and the budding superstars that are coming out there? I think more than anything else, what happens is when you have a real good coach, you have a real good culture, and you've got a dog like Jimmy Butler, who's always believed that he should always be in the conversation of being one of the top elite basketball players in the game of basketball, you are going to always elevate that team that he's a part of, or that organization that he's a part of, in the conversation of being among the best of whatever conference that he's going to represent. That being said, is this a coming out party for a team like the Denver Nuggets to recognize very quickly that they should not sleep on the talent level that we have seen in display of the way that the Heat was able to move themselves into this position to compete for an NBA championship?
I mean, the Nuggets obviously cannot take Miami lightly. I think where the Heat are going to struggle is in the scheming against Jokic, because sure, you can try to double him, even triple him, so to speak, but he's one of the best passers in our game. And and guys cut off of him. Like, there's going to be body movement, not just ball movement, body movement by Nuggets players, because they know he's going
And
to
this is
see.
going to be, listen, this is probably going to be Bam Adebayo's toughest test
Yeah.
yet,
And
right?
I
Like
don't know
he's
if
going to have
like
to pick up.
Zeller, Love, and those guys are going to be able to really do much. And that's what I'm saying is what ended up happening for Miami, with a little bit of Boston. Boston lacks ball movement and body movement. People kind of just camp out on the corners, or on the wings rather, and wait for the three ball. Conversely, Aaron Gordon is always cutting to the basket. Jamal Murray is always cutting to the basket, and Michael Porter Jr. even to some degree, even if he flares out, he's a release valve, and so is KCP. And I think that's where Miami's going to struggle, because even if they try to pack it in against him, quote unquote Giannis style, he is so good at finding guys, and his teammates know how to move without the basketball. So it's just going to be a little bit of swimming upstream for them. But you're 1,000% right. What is Bam able to do? What is Cody Zeller able to do? Do they bring Bam in the help position, and put another defender on him in some capacity, whoever that is? If Kevin Love is starting in the game, or if it's Caleb Martin, who I think will obviously be really, really completely undersized. I just don't know how Spoelstra is going to attack that specifically. I need to go back and watch some film against how they played Denver in the regular season, maybe get some ideas on that.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that we're most people were saying the best way to attack the Heat is by, obviously picking up the pace. I don't think that you'll be able to outpace the Miami Heat. While the Miami Heat is not the best team as it pertains to open transition basketball, and we can arguably say that the Denver Nuggets can be, the Heat can basically go tit for tat with the Denver Nuggets, to your point, Shaw, because they have a much deeper team. Like, there's more reliance in Eric Spoelstra going deeper into the bench and running out more guys. Obviously, they will not have Tyler Hero, who I
Not
think would be
necessarily. He could
well.
he
I'm
could
just
make an appearance in the series.
he could, but let's put it like this, okay? Much like Malcolm Brogdon being available for Game 7, it would have been more significant if Malcolm Brogdon was available for Game 6, right? Than it would be for him for Game 7, because you just really didn't know what kind of version Malcolm Brogdon was going to be for the Boston Celtics, right? And I'm just saying that even if you do have Tyler Hero available, if he's not going to be available at the beginning for you to really properly assess how Spoelstra is going to be able to use him, just throwing him in there, I don't think does him any good. I think that there are other players that I think the Miami Heat may need to look at and rely on and to implement more to get involved. And Jimmy Butler has more confidence to use and get involved than to say by us bringing Tyler Hero. Not to say that he won't be contributory. I'm just saying, depending on where the outcome is in the series, Tyler Hero's contributions may not have the significant impact that I think is going to be necessary if we're talking about the Heat being down and the way that the Heat are losing to the Denver Nuggets. That's all that I'm alluding to. But to the point, if the intent is that you want the Miami Heat to be a better up-tempo team to the Denver Nuggets, absolutely, because you got another horse out there that can basically run with some of the younger thoroughbreds that the Denver Nuggets have, as short as the lineup is. I think, to me, the interesting thing that we're looking at here is, what version of the Heat do you think can be the most dominant to the Denver Nuggets, right? What is it? The half court oriented, let Jimmy Butler cook, or is this Jimmy Butler gets these guys involved, opens up the space, and we have the coming out parties of the Gabe Vincents and the Caleb Martins, and we, sprinkle in a little Duncan Robinson here and there. Like, what version of the Heat do you think can be the most effective against the Denver Nuggets?
I gotta say, I'm amused by, say, the coming out party of those guys have already came out. They are here. They're on the scene. They're not in the NBA Finals. If Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin
I
don't.
might have a different perspective on this, and again, I don't want us to belabor our thoughts about the teams who got ousted by the Miami Heat, but I will speak different. I will speak a little differently to this as when I speak about the Denver Nuggets.
So
the Denver Nuggets. Let me finish this thought. The Denver Nuggets, to me, Shaw, they have their moments where they can allow teams to score on them, but I've seen them to be about as consistently good a defensive team that I don't think they get credit for, that I thought we were going to see from the other teams that we thought were going to knock off the Heat. So in other words, I think the most consistent, formidable foe defensively may actually be the Denver Nuggets in this series. And you know me, I'm a staunch person about defense winning championships. Like, we'll sit here, we'll talk about all of the offensive attributes that the Denver Nuggets can throw at the Miami Heat. I think it comes down to, can the Miami Heat stop the Denver Nuggets, or can the Denver Nuggets actually be disciplined and be a better version of what they're capable of defensively against the Miami Heat? And I'm looking at this team and seeing what they did against the Los Angeles Lakers, and I feel confident that they can figure out ways to get stops against a team like the Miami Heat.
yeah, but you asked me, how does Miami have to play to win the game? So I think,
Okay.
again, when you're talking about the guys coming out, I just don't think that that's where they're at. I think these guys are established now, at least in this playoff run, and there's a very good possibility, that one of the two, Vincent or Martin, can turn back into pumpkins, and I think that'd be very detrimental for the Miami Heat. But ultimately, I don't necessarily think it's a Jimmy Butler 40-point per game series. How it was when he was in the bubble and against the Lakers, where he just really had to do everything. The team is different now. I think Spo has empowered the entirety of the roster, and what makes the Heat very dangerous is the fact that their auxiliary parts can all get hot at some point. You never know when, and sometimes they could all be cold at the same point as well. But it's those auxiliary parts that always continue to keep them in the game. I think Denver's length is going to be, a little bit too tough for Butler to dominate. Not that he won't be able to score, but you saw where the Celtics were able to impact Butler a little bit in latter part of the conference finals, just with their overall length and contesting him and not biting on his ball fake. That is an immense weapon for him. And if he doesn't have that to go to, he can be a little bit lost at times, but he's a very good player and he figures it out. So to me, the key to Miami winning or having a really good chance in this series is they have to get production. They have to shoot the three ball extremely well, and they have to at least be close on the rebound battle. I don't think they're going to win the rebound battle against the Nuggets. I think the Nuggets are just too big, but you can't get out rebounded by 15, 20 rebounds, especially when it comes to second chance points for Denver. You have to limit those things. So Miami can shoot the three, be close in the rebound battle, and obviously take care of the ball. I think the turnover stuff is something that we all always know is need to be there. But the three ball and the rebounding are the ways that Miami has a chance to win this series.
Lee Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and this is our 2023 NBA Finals preview. My man Shaw breaking down the keys for the Miami Heat and what they'll probably need to do in order for them to possibly hoist up this trophy. Coming up, we'll talk about our X Factor players. We'll also talk about which version of this team, be it with the Nuggets or the Heat, is there a historic level to what will happen if one of these teams win? What can we actually say about either of those teams? And ultimately, we'll give you our picks. But coming up, if you're looking for the ultimate destination for NBA gear, look no further than the NBA store. With a huge selection of authentic and high-quality products, including jerseys, hats, and accessories, the NBA store has everything you need to show off your team pride. Plus, with exclusive and limited edition items, you can make your collection truly one of a kind. And with an online presence, you can shop from anywhere in the world. So don't miss out on the latest trends and experiences. Visit the NBA store today by clicking on our affiliate link. That's nbastore.vwz6.net/baseline. If you're listening to us on your favorite audio platform, be sure to check the link in the description of the show below. And the Baseline is always working in affiliation with the NBA store/fanatics, and we will be compensated for your patronage by utilizing the link. So be sure to go to nbastore.vwz6.net/baseline. Callie Warnshaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, or 2023 NBA Finals Preview. Don't want to miss out here on the Baseline. We are back, Callie Warnshaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, and this is our 2023 NBA Finals Preview. Denver Nuggets, Miami Heat will be going at it to hoist up the trophy. So, Shaw, let's talk about the X factors for both the teams, and we'll start with the Miami Heat because we started off by our conversation with the Denver Nuggets. So, leading into what you were alluding to before in the keys about the team not being out rebounded, basically not turning the ball over. Which guys are you looking at really to stick out to you that is going to have the best impact or the most impact in the key to the Miami Heat possibly winning this championship?
Yeah, so this is maybe a little bit prisoner of the moment here, but I think Miami has shown at least in a way to be able to win without Bam Adebayo being extremely impactful. So to me, the only way that's happened is because the combination of Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin have been so immense, especially in this last conference finals series. So to me, the X factor is actually the 3-point shooting of the Miami Heat, but more specifically what Caleb Martin is able to give them right now. If he's any version of this self where he's 15 to 30 points a game, I guess, depending on the night, it gives Miami another dimension offensively and somebody else that the Denver Nuggets have to pay attention to and maybe have to dedicate one of their better defenders to. I think they'd love to have KCP start on Jimmy Butler, but also have Aaron Gordon split some time there as well. But if Caleb Martin has it going here, then you're going to have to find a way to defend him at a higher level than what we saw in the previous series. And you just can't allow that guy to beat you. I think at some point you have to get over the fact that, hey, this is an undrafted guy. Hey, he was almost out of the league. If he's giving you buckets, you have to adjust. And I think that's where Miami has maybe not necessarily an advantage, but again, the X factor that I think can really maybe turn the tide for them in a way that we also may not be expecting. And again, I think it's the overall 3-point shooting, but I think another guy too hasn't really gotten it going is Max Strus. And if he's going to continue to start for Miami, he's got to be able to go out there, defend, but also be able to shoot the 3 ball. But Caleb Martin's a little bit more important for them right now.
Yeah. So I would have gone with Caleb Martin easy as well, too, because he's proven to be the most versatile. And realistically, he seems to be the one guy that I think outside of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, of course, he's the person that you could look to. And he seems to be the person that works the hardest, I think, that could position himself to be able to get the best shots. And he rebounds and he defends, right? Yeah. So kudos to him on all of those aspects of things, because again, whether we say that, maybe the teams like the Boston Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks provided that opening, I think he earned that respect factor that I think the Denver Nuggets will clearly be keying on. So with that being said, Shaw, I'm going to go a different route. I think the X factor for the Miami Heat, and it's interesting because you brought up Max Strus, and I wasn't going to go with Max Strus, but I think part of what you just said is imperative in my perception that I think Kevin Love is going to be the X factor for the Miami Heat. Because to your point, if Max Strus is not effective and is not getting the job done with that rotation that Spoelstra has, he may not have any choice but to inject Kevin Love into that lineup to be able to open things up either more or to have an extra body out there to offset the pick and roll play that tends to happen. Because look, Kevin Love is not the best person defensively, but he's at least a veteran enough type player that he knows what he's going to have to do in order to give minutes for Spoelstra to figure out the adjustments that are going to have to be made and whether or not they're going to be effective in whatever sets they're going to have to counter with against the Denver Nuggets. So it's hard to do that when you're relying on guys like Strus, who probably is getting, getting put in a turnstile out there defensively. But at the same time, that's probably why you want to have a reliable veteran presence out there who's been in that championship situation and when called for can at least be effective for, whatever that temporary period of time. Also, as well, too, Kevin Love shoots the three. And to your point, if the Miami Heat are going to be in this, they're going to need to get their best players to shoot the three ball. Now, I'm not saying Kevin Love is the best. What I'm saying is that Kevin Love is the type of player who can get things started, and you can rely on him to shoot the three ball with consistency and more confidence than some of these other guys who have really not been in this situation to this magnitude. Like, they are the underdogs, yes, but I just feel like with Kevin Love, there's a little bit more there. And this is specifically, it may not have been this last series where you could be able to look at him being an important piece, but I think he can be a very important piece for the Heat in this upcoming series.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think it's also about how and when he plays. Because if he plays with Bam, maybe it's a little bit different. But if he plays without Bam, and maybe if he's the five, in some other, Butler led lineup, so to speak, and Jokic is out there, now Jokic can't just sit in the paint and hope to rebound the basketball. He'll at least have to give Kevin Love a cursory look respectfully, right?
Right.
So that can open up some things for Miami offensively, especially when they're trying to get maybe some offensive rebounds, and get some second chance points. So I think those are all great picks. But if there's one thing we definitely agree on, one way or another, it's the 3-point shooting of the Miami Heat. That's probably the biggest X factor in the entire series, wherever that ultimately comes from.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go to the other side of the aisle, Shaw. Denver Nuggets, right? I'll start off. To me, I think the X factor, last series, I said it was Michael Porter Jr., and I think he proved me somewhat right as far as him being a mismatch problem for the Los Angeles Lakers. We could look to the aggressiveness of Jamal Murray, and, we could look to some of the key shots Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was, things of that nature. But I've felt from Jump Street, you just can't teach what Michael Porter brings as far as his stature goes. And if his mind is right, and Michael Malone unleashes him and, at times can obviously, tame him a little bit where he doesn't get, too over his skis. He literally can be unguardable out there. I find this to be the interesting part because at first I wanted to go and say KCP to me is the most important piece, but I think that's too easy. I think Aaron Gordon is the X factor for the Denver Nuggets. I think that if Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic are doing what they're capable of doing, we're really not even having a conversation. The Nuggets could literally blow out the Miami Heat. That's the danger of how talented, if both of their star players are clicking, can potentially be. But I think the factor is Aaron Gordon, because Aaron Gordon has to shield Nikola Jokic from making silly fouls. He has to help with Jamal Murray, who can be a liability at times defensively. I'm not saying that he has not been great defensively in their run to the playoffs. He's actually been really, really good. And I think you can get that buffer from KCP. But the front court presence of the Denver Nuggets, to me, highlights more of how important Bam Adebayo really is going to have to be. He's got to force these guys to play over aggressively. And we have seen at times where Aaron Gordon can be over aggressive. We've seen at times where Nikola Jokic can be a little aloof with his offensive capabilities, getting into offensive fouls. We've seen this through the course of this playoffs. So there has to be a stabilizer in regards to the way that the Denver Nuggets present themselves from a front court standpoint. And that, to your point, what you said earlier about the physical play, I think that is spearheaded by the way that Aaron Gordon leads by example in his ability to bully up some of these guys like Caleb Martin when they come to the paint. Don't let Jimmy Butler, push the guys around and get easy perimeter baskets. If Aaron Gordon steps up, I think that will bode well for the Denver Nuggets and the freedom that they can literally have, whether it be transitional or even from a half court perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that pick. I think, I would almost 1000% agree with you in terms of Gordon, what he's going to be able to do defensively. But I think you mentioned something at the end and there too. And I was like, yeah, actually, that's a really good point as well, where he may have the advantage on some of those guys that Miami puts out there when they go smaller. So he can actually go on the block and, whatever, or at least be a lob threat as
But
well
he's
too,
got to
get
want to be
some
there.
baskets.
He's got to want to be there. There are
Yeah.
times where he just camps out, hangs around the 3-point line. He's got to want to be down in the blocks, and it'll be interesting to see how much accountability Mike Malone puts on him to make sure that he presents himself in such a way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're not running offense through him, but I think you can give him a couple of touches down there, especially if you get some cross matches that will be to his proverbial advantage. But for the sake of argument, I'll go a different route because I think Gordon would have been my pick as well too. But I'm going to go more again with the holistic approach and something that I've obviously mentioned earlier in the show. It is the viability of the Denver bench, and if it is only those two guys right now, and Bruce Brown and Jeff Green. Like that they have to produce. They just have to produce because if you're gonna run Murray and Jokic and Gordon out there, 40 plus minutes every night, it's going to be tough against the depth of what Miami's going to be continue to go out there. Again, we said Spoelstra is not afraid to go down to his 9th and 10th guy, and he's done that, throughout the course, maybe because he's had to. But they have confidence in all of that. Michael Malone has not necessarily shown the confidence at the middle to end part of his bench, especially in these playoff series. So to me, whatever you get from Brown and Green specifically, and if you can find maybe a third guy to even eat up some minutes in case somebody gets in foul trouble, unceremoniously, that will be a big factor in determining how far Denver goes or how quickly the series wraps up. I think in some capacity, they've just got to find a way to get contributions that come from outside of their top two stars.
All right, so we've made some really good selections of who our X factors are going to be, and before we give our picks on who we think is going to win this championship, I want to touch on the coaching, because I think we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the greatness of Eric Spoelstra and the greatness of Mike Malone in putting both of their teams in this position in this particular juncture, right? So we're talking about Mike Malone. He is obviously the first head coach to get the Denver Nuggets to their first NBA championship finals run, right? So whether he accomplishes it or doesn't accomplish it, what does this say about him and in that belief that the guys in there really want it, not just for themselves, but also want it badly for a guy like Mike Malone?
Well, he's their guy, and he admonishes, the media for their takes, if you will, on his star player and 2-time MVP. And I think if you're in the locker room with him, you listen, that dude has our back. And I think they will run through a brick wall for him to kind of get things done. He gives them the latitude to speak up when they need to, and then he's the one who's willing to go and take it on the sleeve. If something goes awry, he never says it's the player's fault for the most part. Especially, and we've seen him do that in years past, where he's called out his roster. But I think maybe because things are a little bit sweeter now, he has the maturity and just the kind of the gumption to be like, listen, it's on me when things don't go well, and he gives them all the credit when things do go well. So to me, whatever happens in the series, he's earned his stripes. And I think, losing to what is a surefire Hall of Famer in Eric Spoelstra would be tough given the talent disparity, but not necessarily in terms of the coaching acumen on the sidelines, because Spoelstra is definitely one of the better ones in our game for sure.
All right. So now, is how you just kind of led me into what I wanted to say about Eric Spoelstra. Eric Spoelstra reminds me of the Predator, right? Like he basically now has got a nice little mantle, and he's stacking headpieces on that mantle. And I would be crazy not to think that this would be an important headpiece to put on there, because everybody is still predicting that the Denver Nuggets is the better team. It didn't matter who would have came out of the Eastern Conference, because everyone looked at what the Denver Nuggets did. But one of the things that I often applaud and respect about Eric Spoelstra is that from day one, he's never looked at the roster that he's had as, a bunch of guys that, hey, I made this all work. I took a bunch of no names. I took a bunch of replacements, a bunch of Keanu Reeves, right? Put them together. He believes that those guys should be on NBA rosters, and he coached them as such. So, not taking anything away from that, what is it going to mean for Eric Spoelstra's ability to get the Heat over the hump and to be able to finally get that championship? I know what it's going to mean for the Jimmy Butlers of the world, but I want to know what it means to a guy like Eric Spoelstra.
Well, I mean, I think to do it post LeBron would be cementing his already, as you alluded to, illustrious awards and legacy, which again, I think we both agree is going to be of a Hall of Fame level. I think that's just what he ultimately wants to see. To do it without LeBron, without Wade, it's one thing to get there, but it's one thing to get it done, especially now to get it done as an 8 seed. This would be, in my humble opinion, probably the sweetest of any championship he's gotten, because of how they've had to get there, and exactly he's coaching his ass off. But make no mistake, if they were to go down, they're going to be disappointed, and not just the kind of disappointed like, oh shucks, we lost the finals. They're going to be disappointed because they feel they should win. They feel like they could scheme. They feel like they have enough. They really do. It's not, and this is not a knock on the purple and gold guys, but I don't know if you heard the story about Anthony Davis sitting in the locker room after getting swept by the Denver Nuggets and just saying, I can't believe this. I can't believe this ish. And LeBron says, hey, we did the best we could to them. That's a Laker team that felt like they were inferior, ultimately didn't have enough parts. Like the Golden State Warriors when they lost to the Lakers. Oh, this wasn't a championship level team. Miami does not feel that way. Believe that. If
But
they
that's
lose
the,
this series, there will be no licking of their wounds, feeling like, oh
right?
my God, why didn't we get it done? We weren't talented enough. They're going to be like, yo, we didn't execute, we effed it up, and that's it. There's going to be no excuses for that team, and I think that's the difference from our Eric Spoelstra-led team and the roster and I hate saying it, but the culture that this organization has built is one that, listen, there's just no excuses.
Right, I agree with you 110% to that point. That this is what I think makes Eric Spoelstra uniquely among one of the best coaches that are out there, is because he has never looked at the roster that has been given to him or that he's had to coach up as guys from, he doesn't care about where it is they came from. He's like, if you're wearing the Heat jersey, then you represent something much bigger than that. And there's an expectation that you get out there and you execute. Like, he may not even care what these guys do if they get a contract to go play for, some other team and maybe start for some other team. All he cares about is what he was doing for his team. And I respect that a lot for him. All right, y'all. So with that all being said, and we've put all of this stuff, we put it in the bowl, we mixed it up, we blended it up. Are we making a hot mess? Or are we making a fantastic dessert for us to be able to partake as the perfect ending to this NBA season? Who do you have, and how many games will it take for that said team to win it?
Listen, I've waxed poetically about this Miami Heat team. However, I do think the end of the line here is coming. And nothing in a way that will make them look bad in any capacity. I think Denver is going to struggle. Denver is going to be surprised, I think, in some ways at just how hard and how much of their will Miami Heat can impose, on a game. And there'll be a game where the Heat get hot from the 3-point line and Denver will just be like, yo, there's nothing we can do. I think ultimately Denver wins this series in 6 games. I think they're just too physical. And they should be able to utilize that throughout the course of the series, drawing a lot of fouls and pretty much living at the foul line in the way that Miami used to be doing earlier on these playoffs, especially when you're biting on their pump fakes. But ultimately, I think that's where it goes. Denver in 6 in a hard-fought series, but I think they're just too physical and ultimately still too talented, especially at the top, for Miami to kind of go ahead and pull this out. What about you, Guy?
I'm not going to belabor it. I'm going to go with Denver in 6. I think that part of my concern is how much do the Miami Heat really have left in the tank. While it was great that they, boat raced the Milwaukee Bucks, I do genuinely think that this series against the Boston Celtics did take a little bit out of them. And I think because now we have this quick turnaround where the finals begins this Thursday, I'm not saying this team is going to be tired. I do think, though, that if the Denver Nuggets come out the gate smoking, the Miami Heat, that it will give you a telltale sign for us to look at the Miami Heat and see how long it's going to take for them to find you know what I'm saying, they're smelling salts and get up before they truly potentially get KO'd, right? Like, you don't want that to be the case because the way that this Miami team has competed so well, I don't think that that's what's going to happen. And to your point, the culture, the mindset will not allow that to happen. But I do think that the talent could very much allow that to happen. And the discipline that the Denver Nuggets, I think, that is capable of displaying, that has shown us with consistency throughout this course of their playoff run, unless the Miami Heat turns that around and allows it to rear its ugly head against the Denver Nuggets. If you have a very well-disciplined team, it's very hard to pick against the Denver Nuggets. I think they just have too much firepower. That the Miami Heat, as good as they could possibly be defensively, I just don't think we'll have enough bodies to be able to stop the onslaught of scoring capabilities that the Denver Nuggets can have, even as short a roster that Mike Malone might lean on to do so. They still just have a lot of weapons that can either get you on the inside in the paint or get you on the outside with the three ball.
Yeah, well, as I said, I think just Denver is too active offensively. They've played some teams. Miami has that can get really stale and stagnant offensively. Really stale. Even Milwaukee, for all of the weaponry that they had in that roster,
vanilla.
Yeah.
You stale and stagnant. I use vanilla, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's tough.
It sucks because you would think that when you have great playmakers on your team, like teams that have had the Milwaukee Bucks, the Boston Celtics in kind, or even the New York Knicks, there still has to be a dynamic element that flourishes through those players or through that team at some point, and you just never see it. And that's what it is. It's just vanilla.
Yeah, so I think Denver does not lack execution from an offensive standpoint because Jokic is just that damn good. And that gives them a leg up in the series ultimately. But again, Miami will be game. Spoelstra will be game. They'll probably throw some wacky zone that throws the Nuggets off kilter for a little bit, but ultimately they figure it out. And I am really afraid of Miami getting crushed on the rebound battle. That's why I said I don't expect them to win it, but it has to be close. But I think there's going to be some games in the series where you're just like, they can't even touch the ball. And I think Denver, like I said, ultimately wins this one. But it will be a hard fought, still a somewhat entertaining series kind of throughout. But yeah, I think the Nuggets are going to take it for sure.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point as well, too, Shaw, about the rebounding battle, in that the Denver Nuggets can be the type of team to limit your opportunities to score, which means that you have to make your shots when you have access to them if you're not going to rebound and give yourself second chance opportunities, which we've seen from time to time that the Miami Heat can have that, but you can't have it if the team is good enough that they are among the better teams to prevent the opposing team from allowing that to happen, right? Awesome preview, Shaw. I'm excited about it. I hope our listeners are excited about it as well, too. While it's not, again, the ideal, quote unquote, finals that we're looking at, I still think there's going to be a hell of a finals. And I'm glad that the new stars are finally getting an opportunity to have their, their name in the bright lights.
That's right. Jimmy Butler and Nikola Jokic will win their first NBA championship. So I think, two of the harder working stars in the NBA, somebody's going to come out on top, and I think it'll be well deserved, whoever that ultimately is. So tune in, fans, and let us know what your thoughts on predictions are. Heat Nation, I'm sure you are just eating this stuff up because nobody's picking you outside of Miami. But let us know your thoughts and why you think Miami can ultimately win this series.
I will tell you this much: if the Heat had swept the Celtics, I would have probably been leaning more towards the Heat. I would have been leaning to the Heat to win the championship.
But saying that they'd win, I agree. I think what you said earlier too is that the series going as long as it did also allowed, I think, Denver and Michael Malone specifically to really even see more of some of Miami's flaws. And you saw how Boston was able to change somewhat of the series by staying down on the ball fake, playing Butler with more size and not allowing him to operate in space. And I think Michael Malone is going to say, all right, let's get that off jump. Let's not wait 3 games in. We're not going to spot you 3 games and then make these adjustments. They're going to come out swinging and trying to limit Butler's opportunities and making sure the others are be the ones that beat them ultimately. So we'll see, man. See you Thursday.
Oh, man. Good stuff. Absolutely. Once again, we like to appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw. We appreciate you guys. We do. Enjoy the NBA Finals. Catch up with you